Hey guys, and welcome back. Let's go ahead and take a look at another capability that we have in the kubectl command line utility here that allows us to filter results from our queries. So if we were to run a kubectl get pod here, for example, we've got a bunch of pods that are running in this default namespace here. I've got a few Nginx pods. I've got one just called mypod there. And all of these might have different labels associated with them. So let's do a kubectl describe pod. And you should see that we have a lot of detail coming here from these pods. But we've got labels here. So we've got one run equals nginx02. We have type equals web server. We have user equals Trevor on a different one here. This also has type equals web server. It has run equals nginx01. And then up here we have a pod, this mypod, that doesn't have any labels associated with it at all. And so anytime that you're dealing with maybe a bunch of different kind of disparate pods that are running within a given namespace here, or even across multiple namespaces, we can actually filter those results by using these different labels to query. So let's say that we wanted to just find any pods across the entire cluster that have this label run equals nginx03, because maybe we actually have multiple namespaces and each of those namespaces has its own pod called nginx03. So what we could do is run a kubectl and then we'll do get pod. And I'm actually going to tack on one of these options that we briefly covered in the very first video, and that is this all namespaces option right here. So this is going to allow us to not only query the current namespace or the default namespace that we're using, but it's also going to allow us to query other namespaces. So I'll do all namespaces, and you could also do just a -A for short as well. I often like to spell out my parameters though, so that I can be a little bit more aware of what's going on. Anytime that you're using these shorthand options, it's not really obvious to somebody who's maybe new to kubectl what's happening here. So I consider it a best practice to spell out the parameters here by using the full name instead of the abbreviated version of them. So I'm going to do kubectl get pod all namespaces, and if I just run that, you're going to see a whole bunch of pods from a whole bunch of different namespaces that I've got here. But if I wanted to filter things down, I could use this special option here called selector. And selector allows me to perform a label-based query to perform a filtration command. And so what I can do is specify the key value pairs that I want to match using this selector here. And I can also do more than one as well. And we'll take a look at how that works in just a moment. So let's go ahead and do --selector. And then for the selector, I'll set it equal to, and we'll say type equals web server. Or actually, I think I said we'll do nginx03 first. So we'll say run equals nginx03. And that should just return this single pod here. Now, I don't have any other pods named nginx03 running in other namespaces, but let's say that I did. So I'll go ahead and do a kubectl run. Let me see if I can just pull up one of these commands here, and I'll create another pod called nginx03, but this time I'm going to put it in the nginx namespace instead of in the default namespace. All right, so now we have two different pods named nginx03, and if I just hit up arrow a couple of times and run kubectl get pod, you can see that this selector here with this key value pair is going to find both of these pods running across different namespaces since we specified the all namespaces parameter here. So that's really convenient, but I could actually specify additional parameters as well. So over here in the nginx namespace, let's go ahead and apply a label to it. So let's say he's going to have a name, let's say type equals web server. So we'll apply that additional label to it. And so what we could do is in our selector here, we could put a comma after the first selector, and we could add in a second one and say type equals web server. And even though my syntax highlighting isn't really showing up properly here, that is the correct syntax for it. And now you can see that we have filtered only to the pod that matches both of these selectors, because the pod named nginx03 in the default namespace does not have the type equals web server label. Only the pod in the nginx namespace named nginx03 has the type equals web server and run equals nginx03. So you can do multiple selectors here. Now, something else that we can do as well is customize output. So let's do a kubectl get pod -- help here. And something else that we can do is to use the output parameter to output different information here. And so what we can do is specify output, and then we could spit out just raw JSON or YAML by specifying those output types. And so what we could do here is just do kubectl get pod -- output equals JSON. And that's just going to spit out the raw JSON here. And if I scroll all the way to the top, you should see that all of these pod details are actually wrapped inside of a JSON object with a property of API version equals v1, and then it has a child property items here. So if you wanted to grab information from these child objects, you'd actually have to drill into items and then grab the property from each of those items. So if I wanted to grab items metadata name, I'd have to drill into items as an array of items. As you can see right here, it's got a square bracket indicating that's an array, and then here's the first item in the array, and I'd have to drill into that object's metadata, and then the metadata, of course, has a name property here. And so what we could do is actually use JSON pathing to extract just the names from each of these pods. So what we could do here is say JSON output, actually we want JSON path output, so we would do JSON-path instead. And in this particular case, we would need to actually change it to JSON path without the dash. As you can see, it kind of corrected me right there, says you need to specify that. Now we get this message that says template format specified, but no template given. And the reason that we're seeing that is because we do -- help again, there's actually a parameter here called -- template. And if you specify certain output types in the output parameter here, like go template or JSON path or anything like that, then you actually need to pass in the template that you want to use. And the template is going to depend on what value you specify for output here. So because I am using JSON path here, we're going to have to make sure that we use JSON path syntax. And so I'll just surround this in curly braces here, and then we'll say dot items, and then we'll put star in square brackets there to indicate that we want to grab all array elements. And then we'll drill into the metadata on each of those array elements, and then we'll grab the name property from each of those. So if we run that, you can see that that's going to extract, using JSON path syntax, the name from metadata from all of the items that are returned to us by kubectl get pod. And so that's going to spit out only the names here of each of those pods. So now in a shell script, I could take this output and I could split it based on a space in between each of those, and then I could iterate over each of those array elements inside of a custom script that I'm writing. So being able to customize the output of your kubectl output is a really powerful capability that will help you to format things and extract only the information that you need from the kubectl utility. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.